All right, let's take it back. We're going to have a great hour. I know it. And I want to thank Chuck Malamut, who is standing by, for giving the Atlantic County Executive and I the first 5 minutes or so of the program. And Chuck is going to be with us until 8:40. He's on assignment today, but he is here. The Atlantic County Executive is here. The two guests couldn't be more distinguished, but we're talking one thing with Denny and another thing with Chuck. But, Chuck, thanks for the time, because this is really the only time all morning that we would be able to do this with the Atlantic County Executive, Dennis Levinson. Let me just give everybody quick cliff notes. Tonight at 7 p.m. at the Canal Training Center, and it's a beautiful facility. I go past it every single day multiple times on English Creek Avenue in Egg Harbor Township. Governor has flown in by helicopter. A lot of very important meetings involving public safety, public service have taken place there. It's a wonderful facility, and tonight is one of those nights. You know, sometimes people try with all their might, when they can't find something that's controversial or find something that they can talk about negatively, they just make stuff up. What we do on this program, one of our monikers, the mottos, the truth in broadcasting. We call BS out when we see or hear BS, because that's the way that you should be. We're talking about honorable people that are going to be meeting about something that not only can save taxpayers an extraordinary amount of money, but is really the perfect type of thing that Levinson has talked about for years in terms of shared responsibility, saving money where possible. And Levinson, to his credit, was talking about it when we were still fat and happy as a county and not broke as a joke. So when you have the county and Stockton University in agreement to do an incredible facility on 10 acres of land, and this opportunity to bring centralized dispatch to all of Atlantic County, and then that facility would be able to house the Stockton University police. I mean, this is just such a no-brainer. So to invent that there is some kind of subversive atmosphere to shut the public out is absolute just crap, and we're calling it out. That's my scientific word for the morning, Executive. Crap. Did I say anything you disagree with?
Not at all. No, you hit it. I was in the office, and I called the office afterward when I saw this online and said, "Did anybody call complaining about this meeting?" Nobody. So I don't know where, they did quote me accurately, where the hue and cry is that the public is out of this. Some jerky guy calls up by the way, with an agenda that has nothing to do with the dispatch center, and the reporter ran with it, and I believe she realizes that maybe that isn't as accurate as it should be. That there was a bunch of people that were angered over this.
So, Denny, we won't talk about the garbage because we just took the trash out. So 4 freeholders, so there's not a quorum, so there's not a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act of some illegal public meeting, and the public is shut out, and all this nonsense. Other mayors and other people, assuming yourself and others, will be in attendance. What is the meeting for, and what are you looking positively to try to accomplish?
Well, the mayors themselves overwhelmingly asked for a centralized dispatch center, which many have been asking for about 30-some years. And it's finally coming close to fruition, and many mayors and towns are getting cold feet because they have cut deals where with other counties they have gone in. A few of the towns have consolidated together to do this, and when you decide on something 2 years ago, there was different mayors that were sitting there, different council people, and there's personalities involved here. Well, that was then, and I'm in now, and I'm not sure this is a good idea. So I'm going to let them know tonight, and they're going to have to let me know. If you don't want this, say so. Don't sit there and take your shots. Well, I only want to be charged for the amount of calls that I get that go out. In other words, in the town that you live in, Egg Harbor Township, you pay for a service. If you have 10 calls or 20 calls or 100 calls a week, you pay for that. Well, we don't want to. We only want to pay when we use the service. Well, how are you going to do that? Other towns are saying, well, 28,000 is too low to start. Well, it's not too low to start. It's negotiated salary that we have with our CWA workers, our Teamsters. That's a starting salary. It doesn't mean you're going to come in at that. Other towns are upset about the fact that we're not going to hire. Well, there's a possibility we won't be hiring their dispatchers, because the only fair way to do this is by a competitive test. We'll take the ones that score the highest. And now, well, so-and-so came to me. They're 5 or 6 years away from retirement, and if they don't pass the test, what does that mean? Well, it means, we want the most competent dispatchers we can find. Why wouldn't they pass the test? And, it's going to be an honest, competitive test. So now that it's coming that close, suddenly there's trepidation on the part of certain towns whether they wish to go in or not. And that's why I called this emergency meeting, to bring the mayors in, the police and fire also. The fire service will be there. They seem to be very enthusiastic about it, but the police are not that enthusiastic about it. So we might as well iron this damn thing out and decide whether we want to go forward with it, because is it going to save money? Well, it eventually will save money. In the beginning, though, we have to have a building. And one individual said, well, look, we got plenty of empty warehouses. Why don't you just put it in there? We can't do that. We have to build it to specs. The walls have to be a certain amount, and you have to build it outside of a floodplain. No sense in putting a emergency dispatch service on the beach in Ventnor or Margate. You have to have some place where we know it'll be outside of the floodplain. We need a safe area. We need it secure.
And Denny, this just sounded so right. I mean, Stockton was stepping up. So Stockton University would pony up about $5 million, maybe a little less, but about $5 million. They would give the 10 acres. They would be able to then house their police department at the facility. Then you'd have all 23 municipalities paying for it in perpetuity under the what you talk about all the time in terms of it being fair, based on equalized real estate value. And it just seemed like that its time had come.
It sure does. In fact, if a town, let's say, pays $400,000 a year for dispatch, well, they're no longer going to have that in their local tax bill. That's going to be in the county. We're willing to even take that hit and pay for it, the county itself. So it seems like a no-brainer, but it's not a no-brainer. All the questions, now we have to satisfy everybody, and that is not going to work.
Have you noticed all through the years, in the best of times now and the worst of times, every time you bring up the issue of shared services, it's initially greeted with much agreement, and then all of a sudden, it's like a prison being built in your neighborhood. Well, we need prisons. Well, not in my neighborhood. I want to keep my superintendent. No, I don't want that. So this is the typical sort of human nature taking over again, isn't it?
It sure is. Look at Northfield and Linwood. They shared a police chief for 3.5 years, and they came up with the idea that it didn't save money. Well, how could it not have saved money? And, of course, that idea is done. So in Linwood, Northfield, Summers Point, you have 4 fire chiefs, you have 4 superintendents of schools, you got 3 police chiefs. And they wonder why their taxes are the way they are in these small municipalities. So we don't start sharing. We have 565 municipalities in this state, and we have more than Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Delaware put together. And that's why our taxes are so incredibly high in the state of New Jersey, the idea that they won't cooperate. Hey, look, in Burlington County, they do have a centralized dispatch center. It took 40 years for everybody to get on board in Burlington County. Imagine.
Well, Danny, tonight is very important, and I'd like to give you a call to follow up if we could tomorrow morning.
Absolutely. I'm always available to you, Harry.
Thanks, Danny. Good luck tonight. Big meeting.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're in good hands. Thank you. 15 minutes past the hour from Dennis Levinson to our official financial advisor to the Early in the Morning program, Chuck Malamut. Chuck, very generous of you because I know your time is limited this morning. On other days, we could have just said Chuck will stay till the end of the hour if his schedule permitted, but today Chuck actually is leaving a few minutes early. But that, Chuck, I thought was very important for the citizens to hear exactly what that is and what it isn't.
Good morning, Harry. Look, Denny is a class act. He runs, does a great job, running the county. the fact that someone takes a hit on him, the least I can do is give Denny a few minutes of our time.
Chuck, thank you. Let me give you your opening comment. Go.
Harry, a couple of weeks ago, we mentioned the word volatility, and because the market had seemed to get somewhat complacent, and now we're at a point in time. Take a look at last week, and if you take a look at what happened yesterday, you take a look at where we are this morning. The volatility index for the VIX is back. The market has a tendency, as you know, to focus on any of a number of items. So we are looking now at the Fed. All eyes are on the Fed at the upcoming meeting, but sort of a little bit of a sidestep here because oil, as you know, is has really taken, unfortunately, for lack of a better word, a beating over the last several weeks.
Chuck, I saw the number $20. I never thought we'd see that in our lifetime.
I heard from there's obviously a glut of supply. If you look at what came out last week with OPEC, and it looks like I think they're at the point where they really need to pull the reins back a little bit, but it doesn't seem as if they're interested in doing that. So, the old adage, supply and demand. If too much supply and not enough demand, drives your prices, in this case, lower. So, if you take a look, at where we were last week, you would have walked away Friday saying, "Wow, what a powerful rally that we had." With the Dow Jones up 300 plus points, but all in all, we were up for the week 0.1% in those particular indices. So, and investors have to really take a look at what they're doing and why they're doing it, so to speak, because certainly investors that do not have a strong stomach, that are looking at this market on a day-to-day or weekly basis, will definitely get whipsawed. There's no doubt about it.
Chuck, let's get our first break in. We're going to come back. One more power segment with Chuck straight ahead. He'll be with us until 40 minutes past the hour, and then we will have some bonus open for him if you'd like to check in on the phone lines. I know there were people that still wanted to talk about the concealed carry weapon issue. When we come back, we'll continue with Chuck's opening market update commentary. We'll feather into the November jobs report, was stronger than even had been forecast, unless I read that wrong. Chuck, you'll correct me. U.S. manufacturing, the Fed, ECB, a whole lot more with our official financial advisor to the Hurley in the Morning program, Chuck Malamut. And every Tuesday morning, this is a program that is presented by Chuck Malamut, a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. He's managing director of his team there as well. The information, views, and opinions expressed on this program weekly by Chuck are those of Chuck, do not necessarily reflect those of Morgan Stanley or its affiliates. They are current as of the date of this broadcast, and they are subject to change without notice. Neither the information provided nor any opinion expressed herein constitutes a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. This presentation is for informational purposes only. Morgan Stanley Smith Barney, member SIPC. We'll be back with Chuck Malamut and you. Welcome back. Yours truly, Hurley in the Morning, and the official financial advisor to Hurley in the Morning, Chuck Malamut, for all of your financial planning needs. Really, all times during the year, it's very, very important to get with Chuck. But certainly before the end of the year, you want to make sure that you have everything that Chuck talks about all year long, your asset allocation, that you take care of all kinds of things that have happened in your particular accounts during the course of the year so that you can take full advantage of everything that's available to you. That's the whole point, being smart about it and not taking an unnecessary hit. Chuck Malamut, to reach the Malamut Group at Morgan Stanley's Northfield office, 609-383-2010. Chuck, you were saying?
Well, Harry, as we went to break, we were beginning to chat about the November jobs report.
Yes.
And I know when it came out, you probably sat there and scratched your head because there were 211,000 new jobs that were created last month.
And was the expectation 203,000, Chuck?
They beat expectations. It was yes, I believe it was slightly over 100,000.
Yep.
The issue that we have here is that we are continue to see a shift in the types of jobs that are being created. So wage growth still remains slow, but we seem to think, and I'm guessing right now from everything that I'm reading, there's a 90% probability that the Fed is going to have their liftoff, as some refer to, or their initiation of beginning to have some a rate increase at the next meeting.
Hey, Chuck, I'm with you on that, but are we also hearing that there's been a lot of pushback not to do it?
Well, excuse me, Harry, here's the problem we have. This has been telecast and broadcasted for any of a number of years, it seems. We have not had a rate increase, I believe, in 10 years. So what some of the Fed members are looking at is that even though those jobs were created and we haven't had an increase in wages, the big concern right now is that U.S. manufacturing, as measured by the ISM Manufacturing Index, recently came in at 48.6, which is significantly lower than the 6-month average of 51. And it's the first time in several years that the index actually fell below that break-even level of 50.
So is that good enough to then say it's a time to pull back then and not to push forward?
I don't think it's enough right now. It's puzzling that manufacturing is weak when employment's growing, and the expectation is that as we get into 2016, that manufacturing will pick up. But for now, it's obviously a weak spot in the overall economy. So, the Fed is in a quandary. They basically have advertised and telegraphed that we're going to get an increase. It's evidenced in what happened last week in the Treasury market. You think about it, the 10-year right now is at about 2.27 going into the weekend. It's slightly lower than that right now, but when the market in August had a really, really difficult time in that major sell-off, that 10-year was below 2%. So you think about a 25 basis point increase, and you take a Fed rate, or you take a 10-year rate that is under 2, which is now approaching 2.25, 2.3, it's pretty much, baked in, so to speak, that we're going to be getting this increase.
Now, you can't predict, but I can't figure out if we have an increase, is that going to initially be negative? Or if we don't have the increase, could it be negative? Is it a potentially short-term no-win scenario?
Well, look, we all come to the conclusion that the Fed is likely to start, this tightening phase. We're thinking that these rate increases are going to be slow and modest, 25 basis points, not every meeting, have a rate increase, take a couple meetings off, take a look at the corresponding data, and then make a decision to move forward or not. But I said to you, Harry, before, it's been almost 10 years since the Fed raised rates. So,
and that is, if I'm not mistaken, Chuck, we've got to get a quick break in. I know we will get you out on time. I know that you have a time certain that you have to be out by today. Is that 10-year period? I tried to find a period in the entire history of the Fed that's ever been like that. I think this is without precedent, Chuck.
Harry, it is. In modern history, we have not seen anything like this. So what investors are, we're sitting here waiting to see how investors are going to respond.
All right, quick time out, Chuck. Keep your thought. We'll come right back. The official financial advisor to the Hurley in the Morning program continues. Chuck Malamut, 609-383-2010. That's the phone number. Put it in your smartphone, your Rolodex system. The number to reach the Malamut Group at Morgan Stanley's Northfield office is 609-383-2010. Tell them that Hurley in the Morning sent you to the official financial advisor to Hurley in the Morning, Chuck Malamut. When we come back, more from Chuck about the Fed. The European Central Bank will get Chuck's take at that level and anything that Chuck wants to conclude with. One more power segment with Chuck Malamut in just a couple of minutes. We're brought to you this part of our program also by a truly iconic landmark hotel in historic Cape May County. It is my favorite hotel in Cape May County. My pal Bob runs my favorite motel in Cape May County. Thank God it's a motel and I don't have to choose between who I love more. My favorite hotel, Congress Hall, is just fabulous. Margie and me and Kristen and John and Noah, we had an incredible experience this past Sunday, and you can do the same thing. It's so much fun in Victorian Cape May during the holiday season. You can do what I've done. I can't say who I got it for because I don't want to spoil it, but you can get a beautiful gift card from either Cape Resorts if you want it to be for all the properties or for property specific. Congress Hall, for example, which is what we're talking about now. 200 years old this year. In 1816, it opened. 2016 represents the 200th year of Congress Hall open for business, which is truly incredible when you think about how much this country has changed. Congress Hall has almost been around for the entire history of America. That is amazing and mind-blowing. 200 Congress Place in Cool Cape May to reserve. Call 888-944-1816. That's toll-free, 888-944-1816. Tell them early in the morning. Strongly recommended that you choose Congress Hall.
Governor Christie has ordered flags at half-staff at all state buildings today to remember the victims of last week's massacre in California. In issuing the order, Christie called the shooting a coordinated attack that constitutes the deadliest act of terrorism committed on American soil since 9/11. Governor Christie will be in studio here tonight taking your calls at 7 on Ask the Governor. In Evesham, a report of a person with a gun outside the school sent the building into lockdown. Police later found a 14-year-old on the ball fields with a toy gun. He was removed from the scene. There is a push to fast-track a bill to allow New Jerseyans to get driver's licenses, even if they can't prove they're here legally. Carlos Rojas is with a group called Faith in New Jersey, helping lead a week-long vigil asking lawmakers to pass the legislation.
This is actually law in 13 other states, so it's not a brand new policy. It's not a new effort. It's something that has been proven and tested.
The bill has no chance of becoming law. Governor Christie says he will veto it immediately, calling it dangerous and irresponsible. I'm Eric Scott, and this is the Town Square News Network.
This is Harry Hurley for the Atlantic City Aquarium in historic Gardner's Basin, North New Hampshire Avenue in the world's famous playground. Here's our official spokesman for the Atlantic City Aquarium, Noah Hurley Baker. Take it away, Noah. Did you have a good time?
Yeah.
What did you do?
I feeded my sharks and I touched one and then I swam right across the aquarium. And then Granddad says, "Is it right now?" And Granddad says, "Yes." It swam right across my aquarium. And then I saw all the fish in the tanks, and I saw eels and seahorses and jellyfishes and Nemo and Dory and blowout fish, and I also colored.
The Atlantic City Aquarium in historic Gardner's Basin, North New Hampshire Avenue in the world's famous playground. At the corner of Arctic and Georgia Avenues in Atlantic City, Angeloni's 2 Restaurant and Lounge has been providing you with wonderful dining experience for the past 3.5 decades. Now owner Alan Angeloni is proud to introduce Mama Angeloni's Sunday Dinner. This is a fabulous $25 4-course dinner each Sunday from 4 to 11 p.m. You have 5 different appetizers to choose from: eggplant, mussels, red or white, long hot peppers in marinara sauce, fried calamari, or roasted peppers with fresh mozzarella. You have 8 different entrees to choose from: veal parmesan, veal marsala, chicken parmesan, broiled flounder, flounder franchise, fettuccine alfredo, and eggplant lasagna vegetarian. You also have your choice of house salad or a cup of soup. Your server will coordinate your dessert with the daily choices. The $35 and $45 holiday packages and happy hours are still in effect. At Angeloni's 2 Restaurant and Lounge, call 609-344-7875 to reserve. Still time to check in with Alan. He does a beautiful job, makes it very special, important, pleased, a wonderful experience with the holiday parties and everything else. And I'm telling you, take full advantage. I don't know how even Alan does Mama Angeloni's, 4-course meal at that price on Sundays. Take full advantage while you can. We are. Oh my gosh, I just can't say enough about the value at Angeloni's 2 Restaurant and Lounge. Chuck Malamut continues. Chuck, you were still on point here with some very important updates that you were doing relative to the Fed. Anything more about that other than, we'll know when we know, which is going to be soon, right?
Well, we'll know in about a little over a week. And as we got the break, one of the concerns that all of us have is how investors are going to react to this being the first and probably not the last. And as I started today's segment, we chatted about volatility, and we're pretty much of the belief that volatility is probably going to continue for quite some time. If you take a look at last week, we got to the point where the market had a very, very challenging time was that the ECB went out and they extended their easing program with respect to short-term money, sort of like what we were doing with QE2 here several years ago. But the market was expecting a larger or bigger easing per se. They announced a 6-month continuation of their quantitative easing program and cut the deposit rate by 10 basis points. Investors were looking at a more aggressive increase in the pace of the purchases, as well as a deeper rate cut. I heard, looking at anywhere from 15 to 20 basis points, and that, sent the market, sort of in a tailspin as this was announced, and then the market after the jobs report on Friday, bounced back. But now, we're faced with this decrease in oil prices. We're getting to the end of the year. So the question is for investors, do you take a bullish or bearish stance as we get into 2016? So, if you look at financial conditions here in the U.S., they continue to tighten. Corporate profits, and we talked about this, ad nausea, that they continue to struggle. A lot of companies are seeing a decrease in free cash flow, which means a reduction of the buybacks. And if remember, oftentimes what boosted the stock price was that they would come with earnings, maybe miss on the top line, get to the bottom line, and announce a buyback, which would, they take stock off the street, so to speak, or out of circulation, which would then increase the price, hopefully, of the stock that remains on the street. So that could be an issue. And if you don't have this repurchasing activity, higher revenues and sales are going to be needed to produce the earnings gains. So, even though the revenue outlook, Harry, is somewhat troubled, the ongoing strength of the U.S. dollar, even though we talk about how it hurts multinationals, should be okay for the majority of the market.
Hey, Chuck, you just reminded me of something that you entertained. You didn't really make it a point of emphasis several weeks ago, but we talked about maybe the first ever sort of unconventional selection of, we've over the years with you, even though we haven't had a rate increase in 10 years, for 15 years before that, we saw a lot of them, and we talked about a lot of them. And they were almost always 25, 50, or 100 basis points. It's odd. Maybe you recall, Chuck, because you're the best at this. I don't recall ever hearing 75 basis points. I guess if they could do 50, they would do 100. And I always remember either 25, 50, or 100 basis points, or a quarter of a point, half a point, or a full point interest rate hike. Could we see, if it's a little bit skittish to do it when it's time to pull the trigger, could we see something for the first time ever below 25 basis points, Chuck?
Harry, I don't think this time it happened. You go less than 25, but I think that's been kind of sort of advertised, to everyone by the Fed. But one of the things that we chatted about several weeks ago was the fact that maybe they come with less. And I wouldn't, if the conditions aren't there for a 25 basis increase in future meetings, they could come with less. Now, to kind of go back, I believe at one point in time when Greenspan was in charge of the Fed, they did in fact have a 75 basis point increase. So
there you go. Okay, there you go.
I can't remember exactly when, but I do remember that happened.
Okay.
So, as we, we're running kind of short on time here, but, what I just was sort of a negative overview of where we are, domestically. But if we look at globally what's happening, one of the things that we've sort of chatted about, what's the chance of a recession, a global recession? That seems to be fairly low. And we think that the world economy is going to accelerate slowly over the next year. So, all the economic weakness that we saw in 2015, it was concentrated in manufacturing, emerging markets, specifically China, which were then ultimately linked to the collapse in oil prices. So the expectation is that we're going to have some acceleration here in the U.S., a recovery over in Europe, and stabilizing growth in China. So if that happens, Harry, we'll probably have an increase in equity prices and government bond yields. So I think in short, over the next 6 to 12 months, even though we're going to have a fair amount of volatility, equities should perform in excess of fixed income.
I want to just remind our listeners, in this full hour tomorrow, Brother Bill Malamut, the president, will be here. We'll be talking about mortgages, the official mortgage expert to the Early in the Morning program, Green Tree Mortgages, Bill Malamut. And I do want to note and honor Bill Malamut that he has checked in to write to both Chuck and me that Harry's picks are volatilely bad. He's calling me high volatility, Chuck. There's volatility in my picks. I got torpedoed.
Harry, you have another fan, Mike, who checked in very early this morning to remind me to remind you.
I know
that even somebody in last place had a better week than you.
See what happens when you talk smack like I did. I talked a little smack on Torpy. So now when he throws back a shot at me, I'm going to call it being torpedoed. So I've been torpedoed. The president is always good, even sometimes at 11:59 p.m. With the latest update. Chuck Malamut is leading the way. Bill Malamut trailing a little bit behind. And Harry, one game behind Bill for the week. Not a terrible week, but not where I usually am. There's still a couple of weeks left to go. And the brothers Malamut within 2 games of each other after hundreds of games.
Well, Harry, look, if you kind of take your football picks and relate them to the equity market, some years you're not going to be up 8 or 10%. Some years you're going to need to take a breather. And I'm thinking that might have happened to you this year.
This is my first, all these years, and again, anybody listening, it's only for fun. It's entertainment purposes only. There's no gambling. But we've been keeping the stats for all, the program does it. For all these years, I've never had a year like this. This is my worst, consistently terrible year. And, of course, the Eagles did me again. Of course, I picked them to lose. Even though it was tempting to take the 9.5 points, I thought they're terrible. Even though Tom Brady, Gronkowski, everybody is out. I still picked New England, and of course, that didn't even work out. So I've only won with the Eagles one time the entire season. It's uncanny. But congratulations, Chuck. You are within striking distance of Bill.
Thank you, Harry. Hey, I got to jump. We'll be in studio next week, okay?
Have a good day, Chuck.
All right, take care, Harry.
See you, my man. Bye-bye. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Don't go away. We had a guest that was checking in. He is not checking in now. Wide open forum. If I know that when we were having the conversation about concealed weapon carry and several other times during the morning where I just ran out of time, if you'd like to jump in, I'm telling you right now, it doesn't get any better than this. First one to call in, you will be the first one on. The computer decides. 609-407-1450. It's Early in the Morning, the most relevant two-way talk radio broadcast in New Jersey history. Snapshot of tomorrow, we have the Atlantic County Executive Denny Levinson at 7:35. We're going to do an update on tonight's meeting, which I think is one of the most critical meetings, or this whole concept of a central dispatch is going to be kaput, because Stockton University putting up nearly $5 million and donating 10 acres of land and being able to build a facility that literally would handle the central police, fire, public safety dispatch, emergency management, or EMS rather, and ambulance and all that. This opportunity will be gone. It reminds me of when Sonny McCullough wanted to bring, this is a very positive, he was doing a good thing. We did a stupid thing. My neighborhood, dumb. Listen, I can't go knock on every single door. It's like hundreds of homes and say, hey, don't be a dope. Vote for this. They were opening up the roads. They were putting brand new roads in Harborwood, and they put sewer in for the first time when we first bought the Ponderosa exactly 20 years ago. I can't believe it's true, though. October 31st, 20 years ago. October 30th, 20 years ago. It was the day before Halloween. We had this opportunity to get sewer, which I absolutely knew we were going to get, and I didn't like the septic system at all. Did not like that. We had that for about a year, maybe a little less. And then Sonny said, look, this is the time. Those streets are open. We're going to put the city water in, and you won't have the well water. You won't have the blue pipe, blue in your tub and all this stuff. If you don't have a water softener system, it's eating the copper pipes. The mineral content. Incidentally, it's wonderful water. Jerry Shockey tested it. It was purer than bottled water. It's beautiful water. It's just very high in certain content, and it's not good for pipes and things. It's nice because you have a well and you don't have a water bill, but at some point you have to drill the well again, and that's an expense. But he said, do it now. I said, absolutely. So we had to get 70%. Either 70 or 75% of Harborwood had to vote. We had a vote. We had an election. And we lost. We fell. It was like if it was 70%, we fell just a couple of houses home short. If it was 75% ditto, I can't remember which was the percentage, but it was the dumbest thing ever. And now you see house by house, people are having to drill wells and things like that. And it just would have been so much better. Could have kept your well for irrigation, even though there was sort of like the city wanted us to not do that, but I don't know how you could have stopped it. The wells could have been for irrigation. The city water would have been in all your sinks and tubs and showers. So stupid. And I remember Sonny saying, it's like a one-time chance. And look, it's been 20 years. There's been no second chance. They're not going to rip up the streets because people were stupid. Oh, so frustrating. Oh, I don't want, we're going to get a bill then. Yeah, you're going to get a bill, but look at the long term. It's much better to be on the city setup rather than on well, I think, anyhow. Some disagreed. It was one of those times where the significant minority, like 20 or 25%, 30% minority, the tail wagged the dog that day. All right, your calls are next. Don't go away. It's Hurley in the Morning on WPG Talk Radio 1450. Let me inspire. We're going to get in at least two calls, at least. You're leading off first. Thank you. And you are Derek Jeter. You're Derek Jeter, number 2. Don't go away. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Don't even attempt. Please don't try this at home.